Welcome to the Hardwood Hustle powered by PGC Basketball. We believe in the value of a coach. We're here to educate, empower, and encourage you to lead like never before. This week, Sam and TJ discuss what we love about coaching, why we get into it, why we stay in it, and then on the flip side, what's challenging, what keeps us up at night, and why at times we might question what we're doing. It's a conversation starter for you to evaluate where you're at, but also to be reminded our purpose is always bigger than our problems. Let's get started.
Welcome to the Hardwood Hustle. Coaches, I wish I could have you on the show today. We would love to hear from everybody that's listening. What we're going to talk about is a really interesting topic, and Sam and I didn't talk about this previously. Really wanted it to be raw and kind of share, what do you love about coaching? What do you not love about coaching? And what do you do about it? And so I think every one of us, there's things that we really enjoy about coaching, and then there's other things that kind of bog us down that we don't love so much. And I think there's times when we wonder, is it worth it? And then there's times when it's exhilarating. We're like, it's so worth it. So we're going to dive into those things we like, those things we don't like so much, and what do we do about that? How do we make sure that we're enjoying what we do? Because I know this is a constant battle for me, and I'll share some of those reasons why. It's also a constant place of joy for me, and I'll share some of those reasons why. But Sam, let's start on the positive end. All right. What are some things that you just really enjoy about coaching most of the time? I know it's not an all the time thing, but most of the time, what are some things you enjoy about coaching?
Yeah, TJ, it's a good one. I think what you enjoy most, what I enjoy most about coaching is this. Few things. One is just the fulfillment you have of helping somebody improve, whether as a player, as a person, as a leader, and just that immediate feedback. It's not always immediate, but the feedback you get from that, it feels good to help other people. And so that's very fulfilling. Two is just the competition. Like, I love competing, whether we're playing ping pong or we're coaching basketball, whatever it is. I enjoy the moments of competition and battling and competing against other people. And so there's a lot of value in the competition. Those are the two biggest ones for me. That's why it's so rewarding, and then you can add other things, when you coach with good friends of yours, or you are coaching people that you really enjoy. Just doing life and coaching, with people you enjoy is another one.
Yeah, I imagine that people have different reasons for their finding their joy in coaching, different ways they find their joy in coaching. And some of it may be age stage. I think that there's problems at any age, whether it's male, female, young, old, all of us have problems. I've coached women's college basketball, I've coached men's college basketball. I coached my daughter for your BCB team here in the last spring. And so different ages of coaching, different problems, different issues, not necessarily less or more. There's just different problems. And there's also different joys. One of the things that I think is really similar to yours, and then there's some different ones from you too. One, I just knew I didn't want to quit competing. The idea of just being in the office all day and clocking in and clocking out just never appealed to me so much as being able to try and go figure this thing out and figure out how to help my team be successful, how to help young men be successful. And that's one of the things that really drove me. I think the competitiveness you talked about, I think that's really important. I think the opportunity, like you said, to make an impact, but there's also some, downsides to that. Like, a lot of times when we're coaching young people, sometimes we get to see those seeds that we planted grow and come into something. And a lot of times we don't get to see them for, 3, 5, 10 years down the road. And so there can be some delayed fulfillment in that. And I think also there's times when we question, did we make an impact? Did we impact that person in a positive way? And I think oftentimes other players that I impacted in a negative way, which I'm sure there are players out there that I have, and never my intention and didn't want to do that, but I spend, time worrying about that. Did I affect them in a positive way? I love the strategy, figuring out the game. I love growing people into leaders. I love seeing people get out of their shells. I love seeing breakthroughs, whether it's not being afraid to fail or whether it's, just a breakthrough in their basketball game. I think seeing people go along their journey, I think is really important. Let's go to some things we don't like, and then we'll go some back and forth in this. So what are some things that, maybe sometimes steal a little bit of joy from you in coaching?
Well, I think anytime the obvious one is when you're coaching kids, and you get it at the college level, but if if you're having to deal with, let's say parents who are ungrateful or complaining or critical of what you're doing, and it can steal the joy from what you're doing because you're having to deal with that, and it takes your energy and time away from the very thing you're trying to do, which is, coach and help kids or win a game. And so that's the easiest one. I think other things that don't love about it is some of the other stuff that comes with it, of stuff that surrounds the game, stuff that influences kids. There's more things around it. Whether it's social media or the pressure of kids, thinking they need to be something or do something to be cool or to that goes with the game. So I'd say those are just a couple right off the bat that we could talk about as parents, and then just some of the things that go with it, like it associates with the game.
Yeah. There's some things for me that are within my control and some things that are out of my control that take away a little bit of the joy of the game for me. I think one thing is anytime the flip side of being really competitive is like losing can be hard, like it can be one of those things. There's a lot of times I find joy in practice and just going in there and working on getting the team better. But I think a lot of coaches suffer from this. And I think I've fought it all my careers. Like sometimes you feel like if you lose, you're not good enough. You didn't do a good enough job. You didn't coach them well enough. And I think people that are competitive sometimes feel that way. And I know that I do often feel that way is, gosh, that's a reflection of me, or my team didn't play hard enough, or my team didn't execute good offense, or my team didn't play good defense, whatever it is, they didn't do well. I can oftentimes cast upon myself as a reflection of me. Like I'm not good at that. And I think in the back of our head, in our gut, all of us carry those fears, fear of being a failure, fear of not actually doing a good enough job at coaching them on the floor. I think there's also that fear of not making an impact, the fear of not really helping a kid get a breakthrough. I think anybody that's coached long enough has seen a kid that they had to kick off, or seen a kid that they didn't really get through and maybe hurt the team's chemistry. Maybe you hung on too long with a player, or maybe you think you got rid of one too early. But I think affecting kids' lives and the way they see things and the way they perceive things, I think that's another one. I think that those are all some things that can take away a little bit of the joy. And then there's the things like you mentioned, other people that can take away the joy from you, whether it's parents or administrators or fans or whatever might take away the joy, because coaching's hard from the standpoint that it does feel like you're always being judged, and when your team comes out on top, you feel a little bit better, but you can also feel judged in those moments just by maybe a kid didn't play enough and a parent thinks this. And so there's times when I've won games and had people really critical of me, and there's times when we've lost games, people are critical. So it's not always just when you win or lose, but people being critical. I think you're in a spotlight position where people love to be critical of sports coaches in general.
Yeah, and I would add to that is just the emotional toll it can take on you when you have another job that's not coaching, and it's easier to maybe clock in or clock out or leave it at the office, so to speak, but you can't really do that in coaching because there's an emotional investment. It's a very personal job and career and profession because you're dealing with people and you invest so much. It's unlike other jobs where you're thinking about it. You can think about it 24/7. I know I can. Like I can think about it last thing I go to bed, first thing I go to wake up, and just the relationship aspect, or maybe things aren't going. It could be a loss, or it could be you don't feel like you're connecting with a certain player, and you want to figure out how to do that to to get the most out, or get help them see the most in themselves. So I think that's where it can bog you down, is just the emotional toll it takes on you, which is probably different than other jobs. And we say that maybe ignorantly because this is all we've ever done. We haven't held another non-coaching job, um, in our professional adult life. So again, we're open to being, or I don't want to speak for you, TJ, but maybe ignorant in that statement.
Yeah, I think it's probably based on each individual job. I mean, what you do. And I think that there's some unique things to something that has a season to it, right? So like in basketball, like there's a season, and during that season, there's things that maybe you like a little bit, maybe you don't like about it, in the sense of like, man, I'm all in on basketball. And so you love basketball and you're all in on it, but you also can feel conflicted. There's times when I try and be a really good father and a good husband. And man, if I'm doing a ton of that, being a good father and a good husband, like, am I there for my team? I ask that question. And then if I'm there for my team, I ask the question, am I being a good enough father? Am I being a good enough husband? Am I giving them enough time? And so I think there's that constant battle during the season, or of that time battle. Like, is my time going to the right places? Even just mental space, am I coming home and actually shutting down, or is my mind space in a completely different place where I'm actually not even that present when I'm home? And I think that can happen in any job, but I think it's definitely really evident in something that has a heavy season to it, when there's a down season and we can be more home, more, available, better father, better wife, better coach, or better husband. We can do all that things in the off season. And then during the season, we get pulled, and there's that time. So there's this whole time thing. There's this whole balance thing. Like, is my life imbalanced? Am I too much on this thing, or am I too much on that thing? And I think that's a general thing that people at all professions think about. I mean, even if you're, you're an accountant and you're working long hours, well, am I doing this good enough? Well, if I don't, am I doing good enough at my job? I think everybody has a desire to be good enough at everything, but there's only so much time in a day. And I think that's one of those things that has to be worked out within yourself, on how do I find the right balance for me. And that thing, we've talked about it before. I remember Adam and I talked about it a lot. I've heard Mono on here, and we've talked about it before, is like, maybe you'll never achieve life balance in any job, much less coaching, but your balance may just look different. Maybe there's ebbs and flows to the season. There's ebbs and flows where, hey, a lot of my attention goes here. And in the off season, a lot of my attention goes to a different place. But I think finding something that works for you and your family is really important, because we know that marriages get ruined over it. We know relationships get ruined over it. And so being able to find what works for you and your family is not an easy thing to do. And that can take some of your mental space and take some of your energy, I believe.
Yeah, and you mentioned it earlier. I think a big part of coaching is there's things that we can control and things that we can't control. And that's in any part of our lives. But I would say where myself or maybe other coaches, get bogged down is by the things that we can't control. And that's where most people spend most of their mental energy, is in the box of what they can't control, when in reality, you can't control it. And so why put a lot of energy into that space where we should put our energy into things that we can control, and remind yourself frequently what the things that are going to frustrate you, the things that are going to challenge you, the things that are going to bog you down, that you don't like about the job. Like, be eyes wide open on it, so that it doesn't, it's almost like, you can have a coach who's coached 20 years, and year 20, they live in the frustrated state. They live in the box of the things they can't control, and they just stay frustrated for decades in coaching, rather than accept it, realize it, recognize it, put your energy into the things you can control. And then you'll just have a more fulfilling, I say these things, not from a place of I got it all figured out, but I've learned how to manage the stress and the challenges and the joys and all of it a little bit better. And even when it's coming, you're still going to get bogged down by some of those things. But I think looking at things from things you can control and things you can't is one piece to help manage it.
Yeah, kind of make a list of the things that you can handle and take care of. And one of those things is comparison. We talk about it all the time. Comparison is the thief of all joy. And look, this is really hard in our profession, not to compare your team to somebody else, not to compare your job to somebody else, not to compare what you're doing to somebody else. I mean, I'll give you an example. We played a team the other night, and they're a really good basketball team, and they'd come off of a loss. And, someone was talking about that coach sleeping in the office since the loss to try and get their team right. And, my instant thought went to like, man, I'm not sleeping in the office. Like, I'm going home to my wife and I'm going home to my kids. And that might sound like, oh, that's good. TJ has good life balance, but I would be lying if there wasn't a piece of me that asked myself, gosh, am I working hard enough for my team? Like, if that guy's doing that, am I doing enough? And then vice versa. If I was probably sleeping in the office, I probably have oh man, that other guy's over there. He's so life balanced. He does both. He coaches and does a good job at that. And so it's really hard not to compare yourself, not to compare your resources, not to compare your players, not to compare your pay, not to compare anything that you do. But I think that's one of those things that we have to be careful of, and we do have to find control of, is to not get caught up in the trap of comparison, because that can take you down a really bad place. And it can make you a negative coach and make you a negative person if you get into that comparison battle.
Are you going to start sleeping in your office?
I don't, no, because that's a decision I made that I have not. And I know at the end of the day, like, that's not how I want to show up and how I want to be. But it's still, there's a little bit of me in the back of my head that says, am I doing enough? Like, should I be doing more? Even if it's not sleeping in the office, because wow, that guy's sleeping in the office watching film or doing whatever, and I'm not doing that. So I can't help but to think a little bit like, is there more that I can do?
Yeah, and I don't know. The other thing that this conversation triggers for me is, you know, there's a lot of coaches that are coaching that have lost their way, and they've lost their why, they've lost their passion behind it, and maybe they're just still coaching because their coaching is something they've always done. And I hate seeing that. And I say, like, I think in those moments, coaches who are in that bucket, like, need to take a hard look and maybe consider getting out. And you see it at the higher levels, coaches who have been paid a significant amount of money and they get fired or lose their job and they never get back in coaching because of some of these reasons we're talking about. They see the light on the other side. And so it truly is a calling, and one that you got to be fully committed to, or you're doing a disservice to yourself and the kids or the people you're leading.
Yeah, no doubt. And, I think we go through different stages of coaching. And I don't know if anybody has never been through the different stages, and I'll share in a minute, but, Don Meyer has a great analogy of the 4 stages of coaching, and we probably find ourselves in one of those 4 stages. But before we get to that, I was talking about the whole comparison thing. I honestly don't know many coaches that don't. I mean, many of my conversations revolve around, they don't have this or they do have this. We have these certain things that are going to aid our program or take away from our program. So I think staying away from that one will give you just, what can I control? Like, what is there that I can do in this moment? That was one of the better breakthroughs for me in coaching, is when I took a job that was not very good. I made up my mind I was not going to focus on the things that I could not control. And I was going to put all my attention in things I could control. And that helped me a lot. Now, I got to be honest, as I've moved on and as I've grown through that, I still have to, on a regular basis, fight myself to stay focused to the things that I can control, because it can be really easy to go down a different rabbit hole.
Yeah. And do you think that is more frequent at the college level, or do you think it's, present at every single level you coach in terms of the comparison thing?
I think it's true, not just in coaching. I think it's in everything in life. You know what I mean? I think that if we're not careful, and this has been only grown by social media, right? I mean, that already happens. I mean, I know that, what is that show, that Social Dilemma on Netflix or whatever, talking about social media and how it affects people. We actually watched one with our team the other day when we were talking about, man, there's some crazy stats about teen suicide, about, like all kinds of different things being affected by comparison. And we have never compared ourselves to other people more than we do right now. And so I think it's definitely true in coaching. I think it's hard to avoid in any aspect of your life. But I think because coaching's in the spotlight, it's one of those ones that's even harder to avoid, because people are celebrating their wins. They're talking about the things they're doing there, and you can't not look at on Twitter or look on whatever it is, right, and not feel a sense of that to some degree.
Oh yeah, I think that's so true. And I think if you look at players and why they're unhappy, I don't know, maybe we're getting down a side road here, but why most players transfer, they're comparing themselves and their journey to somebody else. And then they're unhappy, and they're going to stay unhappy, and they're never going to reach. I think that's why people in general, social media has created that for all of us, that we're always comparing our lives to others. So yeah, as a coach, you'll just stay frustrated if that's the mindset you have in everything you do. So that's a road you don't want to go down, and one that you'll never win, because you're chasing something that doesn't exist. You're chasing your tail continuously.
Yeah, and so I was going to talk about this, I think the 5 stages of coaching. We've talked about it before in an episode. I think I said 4 a second ago, but it's 5 stages of coaching. And I don't know who made it, but I read it from Don Meyer, and he says 1 is survival. Don't know that you don't know. And I think all of us have been in that place. You get into this thing, it's just a whirlwind. Like coaching, it's a lot more than you actually thought you signed up for. And you've heard me talk about this before. You got to be a lawyer, you got to be an accountant, you got to be an encourager, you got to be somebody that holds people accountable, you got to be a psychiatrist, you got to do all kinds of things to actually succeed in coaching. And we're really haven't been trained for many of those things. So survival, and we've probably all been in that situation. The second thing is striving for success. You want folks to recognize you can coach. And I think who hasn't been there? Like, you want to be affirmed and approved by whether it's parents, players, or opposing coaches. And the third is satisfaction. You relax, better set another goal, be at the best, and want to get better. Like, this is when satisfaction sets in, you can get really comfortable, which can also be a problem. And the fourth is significance. You get to a place where I think this is kind of the epicenter of where you want to be. You're making a difference. You're changing lives, hopefully for the good. People want to study your program. You adapt to get fired for the wrong reasons. Very, very apt to get fired for the wrong reasons. He said, folks get jealous, which I thought was really interesting one about significance. I'll read that again. Making a difference, changing lives. This is when things are going really well for you. And he says, actually, this is a place where people get fired because people get jealous. And so that's another angle. And the fifth one was spent. You got no juice left and can't do it anymore. So I would challenge coaches to think about where you are on that spectrum. Like, obviously, we want coaches coaching from a place of significance. They're doing a good job. They're making an impact on lives. And move me to my final point here is just like, I think being a transformational coach is really hard, Sam. I think that for me, probably the most difficult thing, which gives me joy and takes away joy, is that I want to be a transformational coach. I want to make a difference. I want to make an impact. And I think it's just like anything in your life. The more you invest in something, the more it hurts. If you invest in a player a ton and whatever it is, they don't listen, they turn on you, they make a bad decision, players are going to let you down, and coaches are going to let players down. But it hurts more when you're invested in people, when you really feel like a transformational coach and you really want to do that. I think transactional sometimes for coaches is a buffer. I just go in there and I coach and I do my job, and I'm not going to care about everybody's feelings. I think that buffers you from the level of impact that you can have. I don't think you're coaching from a place of significance, number 4, which we think is the ideal place to be coaching from. But I think that can work both ways. When you care a lot, you're going to carry it with you a lot. And when you don't care a lot, then you're probably not going to carry that much with you. And so I think if you are having doubts and concerns, you're struggling. Am I doing enough? Am I making enough? That's probably a good thing to be feeling, because that means you care a lot.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about that before. It is a lot easier to be a transactional coach, and it's a win or loss, and it either happens or you don't, but you're not really concerned. You're apathetic. That's an easy way to approach life, and you see it in players too. What do you see? Players who don't give their best. Well, I wasn't really trying. That's their protection, and they can just fall back on that. What happens when you try really hard and you give your best and you lose? That's hard to accept, that you gave your best and you lost, or you weren't good enough. So I agree 100%. Back to the transformational, coaching, it's tough, and sometimes it's not good enough, and it weighs heavy on you. And sometimes you work really hard at a relationship or impacting a kid, and you don't have a breakthrough with them. And that's a very personal thing. And so, yeah, if not handled correctly, again, you'll live in a state of frustration. So you got to count your wins and celebrate those too.
Yeah, and I think that it's really important to keep in perspective when you think about trying to go about being a transformational coach and make an impact both on and off the court. that it's okay to feel those feelings. And I know this one's going to be a little bit countercultural here, but it's okay to fail sometimes too. I always think about that Google study where it talks about, hey, what actually makes for a good team, a good culture. They did that study and they found really there's only one common thing that showed up in groups that really enjoyed working with each other and came together and had a really strong culture, is that they were working in an environment that was safe to fail. And you think about that, like everything we do in coaching is about not failing, about not turning over the ball, about not making a defensive mistake, and all of us can get into coaching and think, well, my team's not running good offense, like we're failing, and that's a reflection of me. And like all these things burn against what actually is the number one indicator of what it's like to be in a good environment to work with a good team, is that it's okay to fail sometimes. It's okay to make mistakes. And those two things, I know as a coach, we got to help our team to not turn the ball over, to be in the right place, to do the things you want them to do offensively. But it really, those two things fight against each other, is like, hey, it's okay to fail. We need to learn from it. We need to grow, versus like, I need you to do it right now because we have a game tomorrow. And I often feel a lot of rub in that predicament of, gosh, I want them to be great and I want them to be precise, but I also don't want them to do everything they're doing out of fear. I want them to be okay with making mistakes. That can be a really fine line in coaching that can be really difficult to navigate.
Yeah, and it ties into exactly what we're saying, which is, are you coaching out of fear or are you coaching out of the pursuit of love of something? And I would say a lot of my life, I've probably run from fear rather than towards something or for the love of something. And I think my faith has helped me in that. But I just say that again. There's a big difference in coaching with fear or pursuing something because you love something. And I think one of the ways to make sure, check yourself, is, why do you coach? What do you love about it? Back to where we started with this thing. What do you love about it? What do you not love about it? And then focus your energies on what you can control. I think that's really big. And that'll play out in your players that you coach. They'll feed off of that energy and that personality that you take on too.
Yeah. When you coach from a place of fear, you usually create fearful players, and I know I'm guilty of that. Like when I feel the tension, like need to win a game, need to whatever, I coach from a place of, I can have to catch myself, but coach from a place of like fear-based coaching. Like, man, all right, you did this wrong. I'm fearful we're going to lose. And I go, and I know teams can feel that, versus a place of coaching from love and like, we're going after winning and we're chasing this and we're going to give the best effort we got. And we definitely, I can go game from game and feel myself coaching from a place of fear of not wanting to lose, and going from a place of coaching from love and just saying, we're pursuing winning and we're going after this as a team and we're going to be collective in this. And, and it is tough, man. I'll tell you what, it is just really tough to walk that line, because I think all of us as coaches probably have a predetermined notion of how we want to show up. And the idea of really showing up that way, or the practice of really showing up that way, is not as easy as we think. And so coaches, I think, just stay encouraged. Sam and I are talking about these battles that we're feeling and that we feel. And, we talk a lot about being transformational coaches, and we've had a lot of great transformational coaches in our life that affected us. And we still are fighting this. We're still fighting for work-life balance. We're still fighting to go out there and coach from a place of love and not from a place of fear. Even when we know better, sometimes we don't do better. And so, I'd love to hear what other coaches are working against or working with. What are the things that are going in their favor, and what are the things they think are going against them? What do they love about coaching? What do they not love about coaching? Because I think it's really healthy for me to even have this conversation with you, Sam, to get this stuff that I'm feeling out of me and articulate it. Because then when you know that it's something in front of you, and you know that maybe it's something you're doing well, or you know that it's a problem, when you know better, you have a chance to do better. And I think it'll help coaches to have these conversations with other people, whether it's their spouse or whether it's their assistant coaches or whether it's with other coaches, to surface some of the things that are going well and some of the things that aren't going well for you and your coaching.
Yeah, well said, TJ. And I do think it's an important conversation, and one that you should have annually, multiple times a year. Check in, remind yourself, keep something on your desk, on your mirror, that reminds you why you do what you do. And if not, you could fall victim to what all the things that frustrate you. So coaches, stay encouraged, surround yourself with people that lift you up, that help hold you accountable to the right things, and know what you're pursuing and what you're striving for.
Yeah, so coaches, hit us up at Hardwood_hustle if you've got some ideas of things that are going well, that you're really enjoying about coaching, or some things that maybe take the joy of coaching away from you. I'd love to know what your thoughts are on that. And like Sam said, stay encouraged, because it's a tough job. It's a tough profession, but it's also a really worthy pursuit. You have a chance to make a really big impact. So we celebrate you for what you're doing and want you to stay encouraged, especially during this holiday season and in the thick of it during the season. Stay encouraged about what you do. So, hey, he is Sam. I am TJ, and we are the Hardwood Hustle.
Thanks again for tuning into this episode of the Hardwood Hustle, where we believe in the value of a coach. Be sure to check us out on Twitter and Instagram at Hardwood_hustle to stay up to date on the latest episodes and share your thoughts with our coaching community. From the Hardwood Hustle team, thanks again. We can't wait to be with you again next week.